Ever heard part of a story about someone and wanted to know whatever happened to them? Do you like a challenge? Well, here's Dennis Daly to present two more of his unfinished stories from his new project, Finish the Book.
This story is called The Dust of a Million Words. The elder Mrs. Trunk had never really liked to read. It wasn't until the 1960s, when she saw a play on TV narrated by Truman Capote, that she started going to the library in her hometown of Turnetville. Eventually, she would be taking home so many books that many of the neighborhood kids would tease her as being a bookworm. They would shout that at her when she passed. But the taunts did not bother Laura, for she had discovered her own little world in the pages of all of those borrowed books. She was never late returning them, though she sometimes had to stay up all night to finish a book that was too close to deadline to leave until the next day. She loved the feel and the smell of the old books, but the dust was another matter. Years of respiratory problems had left her inclined to having bad headaches whenever she encountered too much dust, and the kind of books she borrowed from that city's tiny library were unusually old and time-worn and full of years of accumulated dust. For you see, Laura Trunk was the only person to ever take that kind of book from the library, at least at first. For after her death, as the words of the contents of a letter left in her house, telling about the secret in one of those books, but not mentioning which one, she would not be the last.
Now, the second of Dennis's two unfinished stories this time around.
The story is called Dave Goodman's DNA. If he had heard it once, he'd heard it 1,000,000 times in his 46 years. You're just like your father. And in too many ways to count, Dave Goodman was just like his old man. First of all, there were the physical similarities. You can look at any old photo of the elder Goodman at age 20 or 30 and then compare the way Dave looked at that age, and they might as well have been twins, except for the different styles of clothing. Dave even sounded like his dad, so much that his mom could never tell them apart on the family's antiquated hall telephone. The striking similarities didn't stop there. They had had the same favorite color, yellow, the same food, lima beans. They liked the same kind of car, and even shared an interest in the same kind of music, bluegrass. To everyone but Dave, all of these marvelous carbon copy-like things concerning himself and his long-departed father were great fun. They were the constant topics of conversation around the little town of Charles. But to Dave, who had hated his dad since that incident at Ruggers Lake, where both of them nearly drowned, and young Dave was sworn to secrecy, all of the comparisons were like rubbing salt into a wound. Dave Goodman was convinced that unless he left home and did it soon, he would always simply be the shadow of his late father. But all of that changed one hot summer day in his 47th year, when Dave went back alone to Ruggers Lake.
Check in again here on YouTube for more of Dennis's projects, including his series of unfinished stories.